Our foray into the lesser known football leagues continues with a trip to Bulgaria. Now I know what you're thinking, Bulgaria is a Quidditch playing nation first and foremost, but it turns out they play football as well. So let's check out the stadiums of the first professional football league. That's the name, it's not actually the first one to exist. Arena Arda. Although the stadium is structurally very similar to how it was when it opened in the 60s, it's fresh off a renovation a couple of years back. They transformed it from a near ruin-like state into a fairly clean-looking stadium that even includes a decent little video board. I also like how the stadium is more or less completely surrounded by trees. That's why the fans call it Arena Arbor. They don't, but they will now, having seen this video. They won't. Nestled into the parklands of Stara Zagora, we have Stadium Bero, which has been carved into the undulating landscape in a satisfying manner. A few years back, the stadium's appearance was livened up upon receiving these green and white seats throughout, except for this very interesting section of terracing behind the western end. I can see why it's considered by many to be one of the country's best stadiums, but it would have been even better if it were rectangular. Footballen Complex Botev 1912. As little as I know about Bulgarian football, I can confidently say that this club is not one of the country's juggernauts. Although it is new and in good condition, this is barely a stadium. But if you are just going to have one small stand, you can at least make it stand out, and they certainly have done that. It's quite vibrant. Stadion Hristo Botev. The capacity here is made up of mostly concrete terracing, with small sections of seating and a minuscule section of covered seating. But that doesn't matter, the highlight of the stadium would have to be the beautiful mountain backdrop, which is a reminder that Bulgaria is actually in the Balkans, even though it's probably not the first country that springs to mind when you say Balkans. Just a stone's throw from the Black Sea is Stadion Ticha. Sitting amongst the residential buildings of the city, it certainly keeps a low profile. You'd hardly notice it from street level. After all, the stands only have about a dozen rows of seats. It's not very big. And due to room constraints, it's not getting any bigger. They have planned on building a new stadium elsewhere in the city, but after years of trying, it has yet to come to fruition. Stadion Bistrica is the smallest stadium in the league. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in advertising for betting companies, and who doesn't love that? At least they are in keeping with the stadium's colour scheme. The venue does actually seem like it's in really good condition compared to most of the stadiums we've seen so far, and that's due to the recent expansions and renovations. Stadion Bulgarska Armia is situated slap bang in the middle of Sofia's biggest park, a park that I've actually strolled through before. Right past this stadium, in fact, only I assumed it was abandoned. I mean, can you blame me? It is quite overgrown on the outside, as you can see, and well, one side of the ground is actually abandoned, so I was half right. Yeah, it's not in great condition, but it's a nice location. I like that park. From a tranquil park to basically the side of a highway, Stadion Georgi Bengovsky. Oh my word, does this company sponsor the country of Bulgaria? Maybe not, but they do sponsor the league, so fair enough. There are two opposing stands that look rather nice, equipped with green and white bucket seats, but the rest is all metal on concrete, leaving the stadium looking a little bit drab and presumably quite uncomfortable in the middle of winter. This one's also named after a Georgi, but it goes by the commercial name of Vivacom Arena. For the most part, it's like many of the stadiums we've seen so far, with the addition of the main stand. That was built 6 or 7 years back. And of course, it's bigger than the ones we've seen. It's a decent stadium for sure. Stadion Lokomotiv. This stadium is currently undergoing a full transition from a boring old-school multi-purpose stadium to a football-specific rectangular stadium, with just the eastern stand remaining from the original design. It's set to be completed in a couple of years' time. While they're at it, I can think of another stadium in Plovdiv that could use a bit of a renovation. Look at the state of that. Interesting how the club's crest is just the Cyrillic version of the letter L, which seems odd, but Bulgarians do tend to be quite proud of the fact that they invented the Cyrillic alphabet. Stadion Lokomotiv. I feel like I've heard that name somewhere. In a bit of a coincidence, this stadium once hosted a Kylie Minogue concert, and she famously sings that song called I Like Trains or something like that. Oh yes, of course, locomotion. Ironically, the stadium has actually removed its track. Anyway, enough about trains. This has a bit of an odd layout, it almost looks like it's been chopped in half. But I believe it has more covered seating than any other ground in the league, so that's good. Although it could be Hoover Farmer Arena, which is probably the most modernized stadium in the league, as it has been completely rebuilt and retains none of its original structure. It still keeps to a simple formula of an individual all-seater stand on each side. Some might say it's a British-style stadium. Some might say it's a fire truck. Either way, it looks great. It's mad to think that a town of 40,000 or so people might have the best stadium in the country. Stadion Hristo Botev. Yeah, there it is again. I'm getting some weird deja vu here. This is basically the poor man's Stadion Baro, with the main stand, well the only stand, being built into the rising earth. The rest of the field is surrounded by concrete, which is not the best look as we established earlier. However, there is just something about this stadium that I really like. Might just be the way it sits between the town and the mountain, I don't know. Vasilevsky National Stadium. We're back at that park in Sofia. The National Stadium is the biggest in the league, as you might expect, but it's not actually the biggest stadium in the country. That was that decrepit looking stadium in Plovdiv we saw earlier. The design is just a simple single-tiered open bowl, with some little roofs for a few thousand spectators, but it does have a grand train station-esque facade on the side facing the street, so that's pretty cool. Stadion Alexander Shalomonov. That name really rolls right off the tongue. Alexander Shalomonov. Alexander Shalomonov. I was gonna say this is just another one of those boring, soulless, elongated donut stadiums, but then I noticed this little upper tier with the roof, and that really saved it for me, you know? Perhaps unsurprisingly, that was built more recently than the rest of the stadium. There's not all that much else to say other than Shalomonov. Stadion Spartak. This shares a lot of similarities with Stadion Ticha, except having been renovated just a few years ago, it's in much better condition. That renovation included not just new seats throughout the entire seating bowl, but a new artificial turf field as well. I'm not usually a fan of that, but beforehand the natural grass field wasn't in the best condition, so perhaps it's for the best. So there you have it. My favourite stadium of the lot is probably Hoover Farmer Arena. It has the most up-to-date facilities, but shout out to Stadion Baro. I like the way that one blends into the landscape. If you're new, consider subscribing, and as always, thanks for watching, have a good one.